Hi, Mike. How you doing? You're muted, Mike.
Hello.
You okay?
Blimey, everyone's a bit early, aren't you? You got no work to do. Right. First of all, where is Cyril?
I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, you're there. Good, great. I can't
I'm here.
see
Sorry.
you.
Yep. No, sorry. Just putting my
Oh,
camera on.
there you go. I can
Yep.
see you. Well done. Well done. Right. Where's Tim?
Tim is next to me, actually. He's just sitting next to me. We're in the meeting room together.
Oh, good, great. Right. So that's it. I'm happy. I've got my speakers. Hello, Ken. How are you, mate? You all right? Can't hear him, which is normal, which is fine. You're muted, Ken. Yeah, technology is something that, you know.
It's my age, you know, Michael.
I was not saying anything about your age. I would never ever disrespect a man of your caliber. How are you, mate?
I've got dressed up specially for it. Great.
Well,
Thanks,
I'm pleased you're dressed, mate. I think we're all pleased you're dressed.
I tell you what, you really do well with these face-to-face meetings. I'm really delighted.
I thought you'd be fed up with my face, but I'm pleased. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No, I've made my mind up to try and get down to your place next time you had one in the Guildhall, because we're doing nothing up here. It's just a dead duck, you know. So.
Oh well, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, we as a region, we do our best to submit and try to support. And try to support.
Yeah.
Unless I talk to her in the kitchen.
Okay, I still haven't got what's going on in the kitchen. God, it's like a soap opera, this.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was saying, I think we as a region try our best to get out to as many, try to do as many activities as we can.
Yeah.
What we've found is that following COVID, I think online is a good vehicle to deliver presentations, but equally we listen to what members have said, and they also like to have that face-to-face connection, and so we run our conferences, which we do 4 conferences a year.
Yeah. Wow.
So our next conference is in Winchester, which is on the 14th of September.
Right.
And then the last conference for this year will be in London, which is the 9th of November.
And they're face-to-face.
They're face-to-face conferences, yeah.
Brilliant,
yeah. And you have to pay for those to turn up. But
what do you mean pay?
Yeah, well, mate, you know, you can't just rock up. Yeah.
It's
a proper venue, but yeah.
Oh, brilliant. I'm winding you up, mate.
Never.
No. Are you still doing training, Michael, for the association, or are you mostly?
No.
You're
I'm mostly working full time, mate.
You're actually working now for a living. Oh, right. Sorry, guys. We have a repartee between myself and Michael, and if I say to you, Michael, spam, it comes back to our repartee from a couple of years ago now.
A couple of years, blimey, mate. More than a couple. It goes back longer than that.
It does.
Goes back.
Ken,
for you who don't know, Ken is one of the CABE lecturers at the Building Control Certificate course.
Yeah.
And he's been doing that for what, 30 odd years?
Oh, a long time.
30 odd years.
You can tell, can't you? Grey hairs. I enjoy it, and we're both interviewers, aren't we, Michael?
Yeah.
I say, I'm sorry I didn't get dressed up. I didn't realise that it was face to face, as in seeing each other, you know. So,
well, mate, you can turn off your camera and do us a favour.
Hey, behave. Nice to catch up anyway, Michael, really. And to meet everybody else.
Well, I mean, at the moment we're 25, 26. We had a few more who have registered, so I'm waiting to see how it pans out.
Brilliant.
But and then we'll kick off in 2 minutes time, which is 4 o'clock. Wait for some of the others to join us. It's going up. The numbers, as you can see, the numbers are going up. 32. $35. Just from the group of people that we have currently, is there anyone who's overseas? Yeah, anyone from overseas want to shout and say hello? I know there's about 11 people who have registered.
I'm in Wales. Does that count?
No, I'm not saying anything because
No.
I'm politically neutral.
It's a good turnout, Michael.
42. Okay, so we're 4 o'clock. We'll wait a bit longer.
Yeah.
43. Oh, someone's dropped off. 42. Blimey.
I've got 58 currently on the on my count, Mike.
Sorry, how many
I
have you got?
58.
Have you got 50?
Whoa.
Where did you get 58? I got 42.
I got 40.
Let's say we can hit 50 and then we'll start on 50. Give people a chance to. Do you find 4 o'clock to 5 a good time? Is that a good time for everyone? Yeah, thumbs up if you think so.
Either end of the day suits me.
Yeah, that's one there. Yeah, a couple of thumbs up there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. According to me, we got 50. So I'm happy with 50. Well, the other 100 will have to join us. The other 100 will have to join us. Okay, fine. So as I start, could I ask everyone to mute themselves, please? Just so we don't have any background noise. There are the numbers going up. There are a number of people who are joining this presentation, and I'm very grateful to Cyril and Tim for giving their time to offer this presentation to us members of the Chartered Association of Building Engineers. This is a southern regional event, but we've opened it up to everyone within the Chartered Association, and we welcome everyone to attend and to learn, and obviously then to help raise standards from what we've learned. As I've mentioned, we've got two speakers who are both sustainable consultants. I'll let them do their own introduction, but Cyril, CABE, Nicole, and Tim Pegg have very kindly agreed to give a talk on around the new approved document that came out in June, which is approved document O, around overheating. it may seem a simple document for those who practice in building control, but I get the feeling that there's a little bit more that we need to be mindful of. What I asked Cyril if he could do was to give a presentation primarily looking at domestic schemes, and to run us through the simplified method and the dynamic thermal modeling method. So that's me rambling on a bit for a few more people to join us. So really, I would like to pass on to Cyril to lead, and then to pass on to his colleague Tim. With regards to questions, if you could place your questions on the chat as a recorded document, what we've agreed to do is we've agreed to pass those questions back over to Cyril and Tim for them to do a bit of their homework and for them to come back with some comments. And what we'll do is we'll put it on our website, so everyone can see the questions and the comments that came as a result. Otherwise, it is 4 till 5, so I don't think we'll get enough through. But saying that, I'd like to pass over to Cyril. Cyril, if you like to take control, and if you like to offer your presentation to us, we'll be we're eagerly awaiting to hear.
Thanks, Mike. Does everyone see the presentation now on the screen? Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. All right. So my name is Cyril Canavan-Nicole. I'm an associate here in the sustainability department at HDR. And next to me is Tim Pegg, which is also an associate. We had first hand with building regulation part O, as this is applied to quite a few of the projects that we work on. And we welcome the opportunity from Michael and the CABE to do this presentation to everyone. So as Michael said, if you want to put any question, put them on the chat. We would be happy to answer any question a little bit more in depth throughout emails, and we will send that that back directly to Michael. So if we dive into the presentation now directly, if I can change page. There we go. So the building regulation part O starting to take full enforcement just a month ago now, on the 15th of June. And this regulation is applicable to all new residential scheme. There is a tricky aspect, is that Part O also apply to the long stay residential, such as care home and student accommodation, which can represent a more challenging approach to mitigate overheating, as the dynamic of the system is very different than what you will find on typical residential property. The Part O, in terms of building regulation, is also linked to the Part L in terms of transitional arrangement. So if a scheme has been registered with the Part L and you are with the current 12 months of transitional arrangement within your notice, you don't necessarily need to apply Part O. And that means that the construction of the dwellings of the block that you're looking at need to start before June 2023. So what is the purpose of Part O essentially is to mitigate the overheating within the dwelling, especially looking at the unwanted solar gain. And all of that is taking place in how you're going to set up your dwellings in terms of orientation, massing, shape, form, ratio of glazing. And we need to provide a mean to remove the heat from the building to the external aspect. The Part O is taking consideration two different methodology to assess this. We have what we call the simplified method, and the other aspect is if we cannot use a simplified method, we need to demonstrate a compliance using a dynamic overheating assessment. So we need to understand what are the different area of risk across the country. So currently, if we're looking at London and the surrounding, as you can see on the map, the area in dark green are classified as a high risk of overheating due to the urban factor. The pale area are moderated risk. All across the UK after that, we are assessing that we are on a moderated risk area. except Manchester area, which are very high risk area of overheating as well. So if you are looking at the Part O appendices and you can look where you want to develop your project, you have a list of postcode which is telling you which area are at risk currently and what need to be focused on. There is another aspect that I would like to touch on as well is Part O is a statutory requirement as part of building regulation. But what you need to keep in mind as well is overheating is increasingly focused and reviewed by local authority now. So even if you could use a simplified method because it's easier and it's applicable to your project, it is possible that the local authority will push you to assess the dwelling based on the more dynamic simulation. In London, for example, and surrounding area, most of the project now are all assessed around the dynamic methodology. We're not even considering the simplified method. This is also applicable to some area around Birmingham, Manchester's, Leeds, Brighton as well is asking that. So you need to be mindful of not only the regulation, but what the local authority are aspiring as well moving forward. So openability of the windows. So how are we deciding which methodology we need to follow, either simplified or the dynamic simulation? So if we need we need to ensure that the surrounding of the building are allowing us to use simplified method. The first one is noise. If the noise level are exceeding as an average 40 dB over a period of 8 hours, which means that we cannot open the windows for assessing overheating, and therefore we cannot use the simplified method. If we go above 55 dB over 10 times at night, it would be the same thing as a peak. We cannot open the windows, and therefore we need to go straight to a dynamic simulation. And this is required to get an acoustician very early in a project to assess the location of your site. A lot of sites now which are redeveloped around train line, busy road, close to airport, around Slough area, means that we cannot use the simplified method and we need to go straight to a full dynamic simulation. And this is also need to be reviewed in accordance with the ANC guidance that was provided in March 2021, which set up as well some noise level. So I will recommend that when you start looking at the site, start to engage with an acoustician so it can give you indication of how you can deal with openability of the windows. The other element are also the pollution in terms of air quality. Outside the big city now is not too much of an issue, but we need to assess what is the air quality if you're close to train line or busy road as well. That can have an implication. Security, but essentially the security, how we can open the window is critical for the ground floor bedroom and ground floor dwellings when you have a block of flats or when you have houses as well. So security measures need to be taken in consideration and how the flexibility and the lockability of the window can be assessed to decide what kind of methodology we need to take to be used. And the last one will be the protection from falling. So the Part O has a very strong view around how the window can be open depending on the height of the building, and this is linked with the approved document Part K. So the area of window that can be open is depending on how you are standing in the inward face of the wall, and you need to have at least approximately 650 mil to the handle. So this is restricting essentially your area of aperture for the window and the amount of fresh air that you can use. So depending on how that can work, you can use a simplified method, but that will restrict significantly the area of fresh air that you have. So two options. First one is a simplified method. So how can we define if we want to simplify to use this methodology? If none of the previously mentioned constraints apply to the property that you're designing or working on, and you establishing that the design of your property can apply the purge ventilation to every room, and I mean every habitable room, and the window can be open, therefore we can use a simplified method. Also, when we're looking about multiple dwelling sites, especially block of flat, we need to ensure that the vertical riser, the distribution of the hot water and space heating is done through vertical riser and not horizontal. So essentially, we're trying to avoid to impact the mitigation, the overheating within the corridors. If you satisfy this criteria, we can use a simplified method. If not, we will need to go to a thermodynamic model, which would be linked to an adapted version of the Subsc TM59, which is the overheating in new dwellings. And that will dictate what are the windows, how we can mitigate closed windows, how we can mitigate noise pollution, and how shading and can be impacted design. The terminal we will come later on through the dynamic simulation as well to explain to you the process. So there's two aspects on a simplified method. The first one is we need to ensure that we have a maximum allowable windows area to the buildings and to the habitable room, and that there is a minimum openable area to those windows. So this is the two criterion, and these criterion are rationalized in relation to your floor area. So essentially, we need to ensure that the requirement depends if there is a cross ventilation possible with openable windows on each facade, which is the example in the middle, or if you don't have a cross ventilation, which is the left-hand side. So without cross ventilation, what are we looking at? So depending on the orientation of your facade, we need to assess that the maximum glazing area do not exceed either 15 or 11%, but also that the area of glazing, when we do a relation to the floor area, do not exceed the value on the left-hand side. As you can see, the key element, if you remember the area of high risk and low risk, depending on where you're dwelling here, you have different values that are allocated in terms of how big your glazing area is. So on the south facade, on the high risk location, we are only allowing 11% of glazing. Where when we're looking at a moderate area, we can push that up to 15%. So this is quite a significant change, just depending on the location of the building. The free area, how much your window can be open. So in total, we need to have at least 10% of the floor area that can be open. And for a bedroom, we're looking approximately at 13% of area who can be open on a high risk. And that's dropped down to 4% on a moderate risk on itself. So the measurement done is essentially establishing the whole of the walls, and it's on a room per room basis. When we have cross ventilation, we got a lot more flexibility essentially, because what's happening is the flow of air going through the building helps the building to be cooled, and there is a movement, and we have a largest area of glazing which is alone. So we are exceeding 18% on the east and west facade, and on the south and north we're going around 15%. And the area of maximum glazing go up to 37% depending on the orientation. So what we're focusing here is essentially that there is a risk for any window not facing northward to have external shading. So shading is also very critical. So you can take in consideration external shutter, some solar control, who can be solar film applicable to the windows, and the overhang as well is recommended within the south facing. So what did we do to understand what this simplified method means? So we were working on a project which is a 3-story building, ground, first and second floor. And we had a cross ventilation that was used there. So we measured the floor area. As you can see, this is a red line around the perimeter of the buildings. And we have used this data into the calculation. Within the document, there is a link to a full set of an Excel table who can allow you to help to get the calculation done. And we've done an example based on these dwellings there. In terms of windows, how do you calculate the area of windows? You need to take the glaze area. However, frame need to be excluded. So this is a big difference between part O and part L. When you look at the window on the part L on the energy side, you include the frame for the heat loss. In terms of part O, we only focusing on the heat gain coming through the glass. So therefore, we only taking the glass area altogether. So this is what the measurement needs to be done there. And the free area of the openable windows depend on the appendix D of the part O. So there is an angle that's showing how much you can open the windows depending on the part K and the restriction of the building and security. So for that dwelling, if we're starting to look at some maximum window area. On the south facade, we had a total floor area.
No volume. Volume is gone.
Hello, he's muted.
Cyril, we lost your mic.
Sorry, I got muted. So I was saying on this one, on the south facing, we're getting approximately 8.6% of area of glazing, which is below the maximum requirement there. So we're on a good situation there in terms of overheating. When we look at the second criterion, which is the maximum glazed area for the room, on the south facing, we're going up to a 20.18%. And here we added a maximum allocated area of 30%. So we altogether, the Excel spreadsheet provided gave us a pass. So essentially, when you will assess your dwelling on the simplified method, you need to provide the drawings and this Excel spreadsheet showing the pass for each dwellings to your building control officer, and that's what they will use to confirm compliance. Well, the question is, how do you calculate the openability of the windows? It is difficult to establish the requirement of fresh air coming in and how you can define that. However, a matrix has been provided based on the maximum angle of openability of 10%, and that's can allowing you to size your windows depending of the height of the width. So you can use that as a tool very early, this matrix, to size your windows with a 10 degrees angle openable to meet the criteria. And if we look in practicality, what does it mean when we're looking at that for the dwellings that we're referencing? We had a wide range of windows going between 0.6 to a 2-meter high one in some of the bedroom. And we didn't have any issue in terms of noise, air quality, security, so we could have the angle open much wider. And that's giving us a free area around 14.47%. When we rationalize all of this against the area of the dwellings and the glazing, we ended up having a percentage of floor area based against the openability at 9%, just over 9%. And when this is compared against the glazing area, it is 50%. So therefore, we're getting some very good result here showing that we have little risk of overheating altogether. And this is all coming up. So on the left-hand side, this is done for the whole dwellings. So you need to do that as a whole dwelling area. But after that, you need to assess the room independently because you need to ensure that every habitable room provide a thermal comfort for the future occupants. So this is quite critical to meet these two requirements, the 2A and the 2B. Both of them need to be compliant with the regulation on itself. This is why you need to spend time sizing the windows and the openability very early on altogether. But something that needs to be kept in mind as well is the overheating is linked as well to daylighting because people still require to get guidance of how much natural daylight is coming up. And now what we've seen on the situation post-COVID is a lot of people are working from home. Like today, I think a lot of people are still at home on the call. And therefore, you need to ensure that you still get an adequate level of daylighting coming in. So you could have very small windows to mitigate your overheating, but you can fail your daylighting based on the BRA guidance. So you need to be mindful of what kind of comfort you're providing to the future occupant. It needs to be a thermal comfort, but as well a very well lit space for them to work and live as well. So which is critical. Therefore, the Pato is only focusing on overheating, but when you design, you need to keep the holistic approach that is for your future occupant of the property. So if we are looking at these specific dwellings, the floor area, when we calculated, we had a fail on the percentage of floor area. We were below the maximum allowed of 14%, and here we're getting only 9%. However, across the whole, when we had the bedroom and the room assessed independently, we managed to get very good result, and that's giving us a full pass and a full compliance within the dwelling there. The 9% there, we had 9.19. We were supposed to be at 9% on the floor area. This is why it's red. I think within a tiny bit of tweak, maybe putting a cupboard on one of the room, we should be able to get that to pass on that one. So there is some slight design that can help you to get the compliance when you need to think a little bit outside the box. So your red line within the building and how you define the zone is critical, and how you assess your floor area as well. So when you put all of this data within your spreadsheet, you see at the end, you got a summary box which give you pass on the dwelling, and that need to be provided to building control. And you need to establish that if we are meeting the requirement of the simplified method, we just need to get the compliance with the cross ventilation. If we don't have a cross ventilation, the same principle applied, but there is a value, the benchmark are changing, and they will assess that as well. But it's essentially the metric can be done on the desktop study, and it's really straightforward. Where you need to be careful is if there is any change on the design as the design progress, you need to ensure that you haven't modified any of the measurement need to be done as well as things going. Ideally, you would like to do an exercise to assess how you pass with the simplified method as a very early stage, almost planning stage, at the end of your stage 4, and you need to do it as well for final sign off by building controller stage at post completion. So now, if you cannot get a compliance because you have constraints around the site, like noise, air pollution, security, or your simplified method fail, what is your alternative? The alternative is a little bit more tricky. It means that you're going to need to go to a full dynamic simulation model based on the Subsc TM59. The TM59 was published in 2019. However, Part O has adapted some of the requirement in terms of temperature, how we can have the space occupied, and therefore the TM59 is not fully compliant. We need to have a version adapted to meet the Part O requirements. And essentially, so there is 2 aspects and 2 criteria to be met. If we are talking about naturally ventilated home, which means that the overheating is done by openable windows and your ventilation internally is just extract fan for your wet room, we need to ensure that the window area as an overall is at least 5% of the floor area. And there is a risk of overheating if there is the bedroom are warmer by 26 degrees for more than 1% of the years during the sleeping hours defined as 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. But also that no habitable room should exceed a comfort temperature for more than 1 degrees for more than 3% of the annual occupied hour. This result is just provided directly by any kind of computer simulation dynamic thermal model. When we're talking about mechanically ventilated home, we need to ensure that we are at least 26 degrees, no more than 26 degrees for more than 3% of the annual occupied hour. When I talk about mechanically ventilated dwellings, we are talking about dwellings which are MEV system, MVHR systems, so system 3 and 4 altogether. Also, it is quite noted that the use of internal blind or external shading like trees or buildings cannot be assessed on that procedure to reduce solar gain, because they just classify as temporarily mean of solving an issue. So therefore, we cannot include any kind of internal blinds or trees to reduce overheating. The use of internal blinds cannot be used on naturally ventilated buildings when the window can be open, because that will restrict the flow of air coming from the outside to the inside of the building. So this is why now the TM59 and the guidance do not allow you to get internal blinds. So the changes between the TM59 and the Part O are essentially around how we define occupied hours and how long we can allow windows to be open around specific amount of times. So we're saying that during daytime, window can be open between 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., assuming that they start to be open when the temperature is above 22 degrees. That's when they start to be open. So it can only be 5 degrees. When they're above 26 degrees, the window need to be fully open. And below 26, that's when we can get start, and at 22, they need to be fully closed. One of the key elements here is if we have a site that is really noisy, and that's why noise is critical, windows for the purpose of overheating will need to be closed. And therefore, we will rely on a full mechanical system and demonstrating compliance with Part O, TM59, using some kind of alternative technology. When there is issue such as noise, one of the easy solution now that we found is that we are using some kind of cooling coil at the MVHR, which is just increasing the size of the unit in the utility cupboard. But this is not a fully active cooling. This is just allowing the tenant to get some tempered air, so they cannot reduce the temperature just like 16 degrees. They only allowing the temperature to be mitigated to get compliance with the requirement and not exceeding the maximum allowance there. At night, we're talking from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. and the window need to be assumed that they're fully open. And here it's tricky when you start to have issue with security, especially at ground floor for houses or for flats. So this is one of the elements that need to be considered and is critical. And this is why you need to ensure that can you open windows, or do you need to find an MEP solution to get the compliance here? And this is when the temperature exceeds 23 degrees. For patio doors and everything accessible from the outside, they are assumed to be open if there is no risk in terms of security. And at night, windows are assumed to be closed when there is the full-sized doors or patio doors. So what we wanted to say in terms of wrapping up this presentation is there is two guidance that have been published on the 15th of June. One is a Part O, the other one is a Part L. The Part L is pushing a lot towards the fabric energy efficiency, the compliance with carbons, and reducing energy within the dwellings. And why this energy is reduced within the dwellings, that means that is impacting how you're dealing with overheating. But the overheating and the size of the windows impact as well the Part L. So we're highly recommending that when you design a dwelling and when you assess them, the Part O and Part L need to be undertaken in parallel because they will both inform each other. As you've seen recently, a lot of the Part L and the energy model now to meet the fabric energy efficiency, the primary energy, have a tendency to go to very high design standards, which are pushing the building envelope U values very close now to some of the passive house standards or very strong building insulation. But also that means that we're starting to have very airtight dwellings. And what does it mean? Is airtight dwellings mean that we need to provide with mechanical ventilation the means to provide some fresh air to temper and provide some good comfort to the occupant. And that is impacting your Part O about what kind of strategy you will start to use and what kind of methodology you will use to assess the dwellings altogether. So that was our presentation on the Part O and the implication between the two methodologies. I think we still have some time, so if there is any question, or we'll be happy to take any question now.
Oh, thank you very much, Cyril. I'll lead by just asking a few questions, and you might be able to answer it. At the beginning of the presentation, you showed us the different types of buildings for the simplified method, one with cross-flow ventilation and one with no cross-flow. What would be the ultimate length of a building where you can where you don't have cross-flow ventilation? Is there? I mean, in the old Part F, I think there was a requirement of the distance had to be no more than 6 meters in length for you to get the movement of air around that building. Is there any criteria in Part O in regards to what the actual length of a one-sided vented building is?
No, that still remains the same. That's still referring to the Part F. The Part F was updated as well, and that's still being written as it is previously.
Okay, fine. And now the other thing I wanted to ask is, everything is all about north, south, east, and west in your design. What if a designer decided to place their building southeast or southwest or northeast? How is that calculated?
That's an interesting one because currently we haven't seen the clarification on part where they only been literally south, east, and west and north. So we don't have the half orientation. So I think the detail will need to be taken from the entrance of the doors that will set up your points there on itself.
Okay.
So,
So your door entry will dictate whether
the
you're
orientation of your
southeast.
buildings. Yes, this is
Yeah.
correct.
So
Yeah.
there is no option for some wise designers to put their brand new dwelling at an angle so as to maximize a bit of the sun, but not so much that it makes us have to go through this very convoluted method of calculation.
You will need to be really on the spot of the 45 degrees because I assume if it's a southeast or at that point. But this is a discussion with your building control officer in charge of the project on how you can take that. But yeah, you're right. They haven't done I think this is the first time that building regulation is dealing with overheating to that extent, and they're trying to make a simplified method. This is the first pass of what they provided forward. So I think it's the very beginning of how they can assess the building. I will assume that when they will run the next version, you will start to see more orientation within the simplified method altogether.
Okay. Now that brings me on to this wonderful matrix that have been produced for the simplified method. Now, years ago when SAP calculations came out on Appendix G, if I remember rightly, anyone could sit there with a pencil and fill it out using tables and and guidance and submit it as the SAP calculation. And the poor building control practitioner had to then sit down and go through it all. This matrix that you made mention of, it seems very simplistic, but is it simple? Or, are we going to find designers themselves filling out and dare I say, um, finding a figure that works so it passes? Or must it be done by a person like yourself, a qualified, competent, sustainable consultant?
For the simplified method, I would say it cannot be done by anyone. Anyone with a member of the design team, architect can do it because it's just literally taking measurement from the drawings and plug them into the Excel spreadsheets that is downloadable from the website, from the governmental website. And when you put this data, you just need to demonstrate that you get a pass. So that can
Okay.
be done by everyone.
If there, sorry, sir. If there was a mistake made, will the matrix pick it up, or that wonderful statement, information in, information out? And obviously, I can't do the full statement that comes with that phrase.
So if there is a mistake that is made, I will say that it will need to be picked up by building control because they will be in charge of reviewing the information between signing off.
That's what I was worried about.
That's
That's
more
what I
work
was
for
worried.
you.
That's why.
Yes.
No, it's not more work for me. I mean, I said it at the start. I do believe that this document, as simple as it may seem and how useful it is, it's not useful for those who practice in building control. I see it as being an absolute
It's
it's not complicated, but there's a lot of time that we would not necessarily have put forward.
something that we notice. What you need to keep in mind is with the change of the parcel, it's been pushed a lot more around over the years. You have a lot of design that imply, and a lot of the building is designed to get very airtight, as I said, to reduce energy. So the main issue that you have now within modern buildings is getting rid of the heat inside the building. The change from gas to a whole electric system, which is part of the parcel using the primary energy metric, as well as a mean of compliance, is allowing you to reduce this issue slightly, especially on a block of flat when you don't have the issue of the corridors because you're running a low temperature aspect. what you will see is when you have that kind of scenarios, when you try to push a building with reducing your energy as low as possible, using the simplified method is not the easiest aspect, because your energy, to reduce your energy, you need to implement the principle similar to passive house, maximizing some of the solar gain on the north and not on the south. So there is a lot of design that need to be taken in consideration as early as possible. And that sometimes is counterproductive to what you get on the part O, and you end up going to the full dynamic simulation.
I accept that, and I honestly do believe that the dynamic thermal modelling would be the better option for building control, because we can then, I assume, when we get something of that nature, it needs to be done by people like yourself, competent, qualified, sustainable consultants. And if we're concerned, would we not pass the document over to a sustainable consultant to ask them to verify in the same way as we do for CFD models and structural engineering calculations that we receive?
One of the elements as well that you have is the difference is your simplified method will be a snapshot in time. So if you do your assessment today, it will be based on today with the temperature that are set up by the guidance at that point in time. When you start looking at the dynamic simulation, there is a lot of weather file which allowing you to get projected temperature for future weather file with different scenarios, allowing you to establish a mean of comfort who can last longer for some of the buildings. So when you start to develop buildings that want to be sustainable and a high level of comfort for the next 20, 35 years, you have that means to assess the building within the future, taking worse temperature and see how you can have an adaptability who can allow you to get a compliance with the future. The simplified methodology do not allow you to get that. It is a compliance with a regulation at a certain point in time.
Okay. One item, again, when you in your presentation, you were talking about assumed that windows will be opened. Is that a realistic assumption? I remember we used to say when we did the SAP calculations, just to make it pass, the blinds will be deployed 100%, like the blackout blinds will be deployed 100% all the time, all day. And we all knew that that's not going to actually happen, but it got the pass mark that was required. So the same about this assumed open for those periods of times and those temperatures and assumed close. Realistically, is that really going to happen, or is this just just to make the model work?
This is on a simplified method, so you can assume that you can open them because the occupant have the opportunity to open the windows. And after that, the thing is, the design of the building is done on such a way that the building will not overheat if you comply with leaving your windows open and there is no risk of security of noise, and you will have no risk. So from a paper trail and a design, yes, you can open them all the time. In reality, and the behavior of the people is sometimes unlikely that they will do that altogether.
Okay.
It's similar when you talk about site with noise issue. When we do for the purpose of overheating, we design a scheme which will have windows closed, but that doesn't mean that it's a sealed facade. The occupant will have the opportunity to open the windows if they desire. So there is an element to understand of what we're doing for a compliance aspect versus what we're doing for a real life occupancy.
Okay. So a question that's come through is declaration of compliance checklist for the dynamic modeling method. Is it mandatory or a best practice based on the Subsc code?
The declaration of, sorry?
Of the declaration for the compliance checklist for the dynamic modeling method. Is it mandatory or is it a best practice?
No, that is. Oh, that would be mandatory as part of the online version. So we will need to have that definitely.
Yeah, okay. So that's a mandatory one. And another one is on checking the simplified method. if the SAP provider offers as part of the package, do you think that's enough for building control to accept it because it's been offered by a competent person, being the SAP assessor? In your opinion,
The SAP assessor is trained to do energy assessment, but the simplified method, as I said, is there is no guidance on who need to do it. So if you want to do it and his PI and his insurance covering for that, he can do it. But from experience, what we've seen recently with the change of temperature, we did a lot. Overheating, there's a lot of people now coming back to the designer and complaining sometimes that their dwelling is too hot. And you need to be able to demonstrate how the dwelling was built in line with the legislation at the time. So whoever will do that need to be ensured that there is a risk there.
Okay, so we might have to ask questions then from if the SAP assessor does issue one, we just have to ask, are they competent and trained to do the simplified method?
No, you don't necessarily need to ask that. They can do it, definitely. Anybody can do it because it's just measurement. The thing is, if they want to take the risk to confirm compliance with Part O, this is a different matter. It's them. The SAP assessor can turn around saying, my insurance is not taking in consideration overheating, because when they are a SAP assessor, they can take a professional indemnity with the accredited body. That, I suspect, will not be covering the Part O.
Okay, thank you. And another question that's come through. I presume Part O applies irrespective of other influencing factors, such as air conditioning, due to energy efficiencies, and the building not necessarily having AC during its whole building life. So sometimes we do get factors like air conditioning units that are put in to give thermal comfort. Is that that's a plugged appliance? Is that part of the Part O requirement, or is that something that you discount when you're doing your calculation?
So if the design of the building include for air conditioning as part of the VRF system to provide space heating as well, that will be part of the full design of the system. If it's just a DX unit that is fitted by future tenant, it could be an issue. It is depending on how will be the nature of the building and how it will be sold or leased altogether. So if it's an individual doing that, it will need to be stated on the assessment of overheating that the building has been assessed with a cooling unit to mitigate overheating. But what you see now is the first pass is to meet the cooling hierarchy. First of all, you just assess how the thermal mass, the orientation, the fabric is allowing you to reduce your solar gain with the massing. If you still have some risk of overheating, you start looking at the ventilation and you're going to get a pass. Only when you're on the last run and there is really high risk for some reason, you think about providing active cooling. But you need to have demonstrated that you have taken the step to mitigate the solar gain coming up and the risk of overheating within the dwellings.
Okay, fine. So yeah, so it's not recommended. So Part O does not recommend air conditioning in their scheme. Okay, that's fine. And one item coming back to me, currently, well, sorry, not currently, but in the old Part F, we used to allow booster fans to come on board to offer air movement and air change. Is booster fans still a part of the design consideration?
It is, yes. Yeah.
So do we still ask for the booster fans? Yeah. So within the Part F, they could still have booster fans, and would that then affect Part O, or it doesn't really change anything because it could move the flow of air?
That will only change things when you do on the dynamic simulation model, because you can change the air changes with the booster fan and take that aspect on the dynamic simulation.
Okay, fine. And just going. I think some of the comments that have been made, I think you've answered those. I think there was a question about security, and I think in your presentation you did mention that security and window openings is a factor still need to be looked at.
Yes.
And we also talked about these openings and opening windows and the change within approved document K, but I'm assuming that part K still applies, so the requirement
still,
to
yeah, so there's a section on the part O about how wide you can open the windows, which is mitigating the risk of falling, and that can impact the area of fresh air coming in. We had a case recently where we could have used natural ventilation from a certain height because of noise were not impacted. However, because of the risk of falling, we were failing the use of natural ventilation and ended up using tempered air within the building.
Okay, so obviously what Part K doesn't apply for is designers who put fantastic step-ups for people to step up on, and all of a sudden they're more than 1.1 for the finished floor level. Which is a separate item. But no, I mean, I think as we're drawing this to an end, I really want to thank you, Cyril, for spending the time to ask to do the presentation. And the presentation, I think one of the questions is highlighted is there is a lot of work for those who practice in building control. For them to sit down and to go through matrices that have been submitted to us for simplified design, if a simple design is likely to occur. Clearly, I'm getting the feeling that simplified methods is not a system that would be usable in central London. It may well be out in the outer parts of the country that are not so exposed, and in doing so, the building control practitioners need to be mindful that the requirements have been met and followed, and then obviously on the thermal. On the the dynamic, is there not an issue about photographic evidence and issues? No, that's on the part L, isn't it?
That would be on the part L, on the gap on the part L, yes.
Yeah. So it's a very small document, but I think it has a massive impact on those who practice in building control. But also, it is raising the standard for the built environment and needs to be applauded. I think I'll leave the last question, and it was a question that was raised by one of the delegates here. We're very fortunate that you've spent your time running through this document with us. How many architects are actually fully aware of these changes and the implications that it has on their designs? Or, like everything else, are they totally reliant on the building control practitioner to guide them through the intricacies of the building regulations because they can't read it themselves?
Currently on the project that we work on, I would say they're relying essentially on the sustainability consultant when we are at planning stage to provide advice. But we are again on the phase of education for the industry. So we are on the first phase
welcome to the club, mate. Welcome to the club.
When we're educating the design team, which are engaged at the early stages, the next phase, I would say we need to wait another 9 to 10 months to start educating contractor, because when you're going to have this project who's going to be tender and the contractor say, I want to do some V, I don't want to use any kind of compliance for overheating, they're not going to understand the legislation as well. So there is this education that will come. So it's a two-step process.
Of course, the other problem that we who practice in building control are fully aware of is changes in designs while the work is ongoing. And where those changes in designs occur, either window sizes or changes in elevations or room configurations, I'm assuming they too are likely to have an impact on the Part O. And so the whole system will need to be gone through again and justified before we can actually do sign off as building control. So it is an important document that I think those who practice in building control need to be mindful of, and also me personally will be advising that they do contact a sustainable consultant at an early stage to ensure that they've met all the requirements before they submit it to building control. Me personally, I'm not the person who's designing it for them. It's not my job to actually tell them the answers. It's for them to submit that information to me. So I think that's an interesting talk. I'm conscious of the time. I want to thank yourself, Cyril, and obviously Tim in support there. And I'd like to thank the members who've joined in this evening to listen to your presentation. I found it highly enlightening. I found it scary because there's more work that we have to do.
You said the same thing when I did the parterre one.
It's it's a learning curve for all of us. But thank you very much for your time. The next event that Southern Region has arranged is our face-to-face conference, which is on the 14th of September in Winchester. We've got other events all the way through to the end of the year. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for joining us. And for Cyril and for Tim, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Good evening.
Goodbye. Have fun. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.